Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is Beyond the Broker-Dealer. A Next Gen sheds light on their evolution to the RIA space. It's a conversation with Gideon Drucker, President and CEO of Drucker Wealth Management. I'm Mindy Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for financial advisors. At Diamond Consultants, our mission is to help advisors live their best business life. We want every elite advisor to find exactly the right place for their business and their clients to thrive, whether it's at a wirehouse, a regional, boutique, or independent firm. As the industry's leading recruiters and consultants, we've transitioned more than $250 billion in assets under management in the past decade, and each year, 25% of transitioning advisors who manage $1 billion or more are our clients. If you'd like to talk, please feel free to give us a call at 908-879-1002. Are you a financial advisor who's curious about whether you're in the best place to serve clients, or if there might be a better way to optimize your business for the future? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a new book that serves as a self-guided journey, walking you through the key steps that Diamond Consultants takes with our advisor clients, whether considering change or not. Visit diamond-consultants.com/thebook to learn more. There's something interesting that happens with many multi-generational wealth management businesses. It seems that from one generation to the next, they evolve, with each generation making their mark and helping to drive the firm to a better level. Bernie Drucker started in the life insurance world in 1959, building a practice helping families find financial independence. Then Bernie's son Lance joined him in 1985, integrating investment management into their services. The third generation of Druckers, Gideon, came on board in 2016 after a stint as a paratrooper in the Israeli military. Gideon learned the insurance and wealth management business from the ground up, working alongside his father on evolving the legacy that was born 2 generations earlier. Drucker Wealth had thrived for over 38 years with independent broker-dealer Horner, Townsend & Kent, also known as HTK, where they were the largest advisory team for 18 straight years, managing more than $700 million in assets for their clients. But just as Lance had helped take the business to the next level when he joined his father, Gideon had set his sights on creating Drucker Wealth 3.0. And it was with that goal in mind that the team left the IBD world to become a fully independent RIA firm. Today, Gideon serves as the president and CEO of Drucker Wealth Management. Gideon joins us in this episode to talk about his own evolution and that of the business. He shares how each generation found new ways to grow and how that motivated them through change. Gideon discusses the transition, which happened just a year ago, and offers advice for others considering change. And he shares tips for other multi-generational teams, senior advisors, and the next gen alike. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get to it. Gideon, I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've been listening to the podcast for years, and I really can't say how truly important it was, helping us through the transition. So getting to be here is kind of a full circle moment, and I'm excited to dive in.
I'm honored to have you, and thank you for sharing that. So let's jump in at the beginning because lots to unpack. Tell us about the history of Drucker Wealth.
Yeah, so Drucker Wealth, my grandpa started back in 1959. He started on the life insurance side. And, he really just had an incredible story, grew up immigrant family. His dad passed away when he was 16 and really built this business out of nothing. And my dad came in 1985. And my dad's really the one that morphed us from the life insurance side of the business that my grandpa had been doing for a few decades and really more into the investment management side. So my dad really created Drucker Wealth kind of as it is now, obviously changes over the years, but more on the investment management financial planning side. So yeah, three-generation firm. We have 12 people on the team, and I can get into everybody's roles. But as a family, we've been doing this for a long time.
And how about you, Gideon? Like, when did you join the practice? Was it something you always knew you wanted to do? What did that look like?
It really was. I always wanted to be a part of the business, even when I didn't really know what that meant. My dad's obviously been a financial advisor my whole life. And I remember growing up, we lived in New Jersey, but my dad gave a lot of workshops and seminars in New York City. And I was always so eager to come and sit and hand out cookies. I was sitting at the edge of my seat, like I was listening to the most exciting thing in the world. I'm sure it wasn't looking back on it. But yeah, my dad was my hero role model growing up. So I always wanted to do what he did, just kind of looking up to dad. And then as I got a little bit older throughout high school, I started to learn a little bit more about the business. And I fell in love even more. The idea that you get to control your own time, your own hours. My dad was always at my sporting matches growing up. You make as much as hard as you work, as good as you are at it. And I love that competitive nature that I got to see from the outside. So going into the business was always part of the plan. I think one of the best things my dad did when I was going to college was say, hey, study what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, because what you learn in business school is not going to prepare you for actually being in the business. So I got to spend 4 years learning foreign policy, international relations, which is what I nerd out on in my own time. Even knowing that I was going to go into the business at that point, I served a few years in the Israeli military as a paratrooper, a whole separate podcast, really most meaningful experience of my life. And then after I finished my service, I came into Drucker Wealth about 7, 8 years ago. And I really started out in my first 6 months sitting in on every one of my dad's meetings, trying to learn every inch, every aspect of the business. From the start, I look back thinking about what the beginning was like. And we didn't really have this master plan of I was going to come in and take over the business or move us in a different direction. My dad really let me find my way at the beginning, day by day. And what I'll say is, I came in knowing that I needed to find my own clients. I needed to build my book of business. I never would have allowed myself to come in and just be take over my dad's business or hold on to what he had built and try not to mess it up. I really wanted to go out for myself and make sure that I could close new business, be a rainmaker, so to speak. So that's how I really spent my first few years in the business, learning how to market, learning how to speak to people, go out and really bring business in. And then obviously that morphed, and we'll get into all of that. But that's kind of what set me on the path, in the first year or so.
Thank you for sharing all that with me. And I'll tell you, for obvious reasons, so much of your story resonates with me as a mom who started the business, whose children were young when I started the business, and watching me do what I do, probably at the time being intrigued by it, but never saw themselves necessarily being in the business. And now, like you, my two sons are essentially running the day to day of the business. And it's a gift all the way around.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it certainly is. So I want to focus for a second on the notion Drucker Wealth is the embodiment of a multi-generational business into its third generation. And you talked a lot about your grandfather, the founder, the patriarch, and how the business looked very different. It's actually very common. This is a wealth management is a business that lends itself to multi-generational and familial teams. And in a lot of cases, the senior member of the team starts out building a commission-based or transactional business or insurance-based business. And it's the next generation that morphs it into more fee-based, bigger, and better. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened in your case as well. But tell us a little bit about the firm's value proposition. So, for perspective, how much in assets under management today? The business started with an insurance bent. Does it still have that? What does it look like today?
I'll start on the value proposition, what we offer, and I'm happy to walk through some of the numbers. So we're like most RIAs and firms that join, we're a comprehensive financial planning wealth management firm. And to us, what we hang our hat on is we're a planning first financial planning firm. By that, I mean, every new client that we take on, going back at least the last 5, 7 years, every new client starts by doing a financial life plan, basically a flat fee financial planning engagement. It takes 2 to 3 months, outlines and uncovers every aspect of their financial world, and really puts a plan in place of how on track they are to achieving their goals, how they think about taxes and estate planning, their investments, obviously, their cash flow. And because that starts every relationship, and quite frankly, we don't even get to the investment management side of the equation until after the plan is complete, and only if we both agree it makes sense to begin an ongoing relationship. I think that's been one of our biggest value propositions are just ways, things that are important to us that we're committed to that our clients really gravitate towards from day one. From the other side of that value proposition, what we really hold ourselves out at is the brutal honesty. The way we speak to clients, hold them accountable. Our clients are usually super busy, dual income, mid-career professional families. They have a million things going on. It's really our job to cut across the noise. Let them know if they're doing something we think they need to relook at or change the way they're thinking about financial priorities. And it's our job to keep everything as simple as possible. The way we make investment recommendations, the type of investments, the way we think about their financial planning goals, everything we do, we're trying to keep it simple, behaviorally disciplined, organized, thinking long term. And I think because we just have those brutally honest conversations where we're not afraid to say how it is or what needs to happen, I think clients latch onto that. And again, I touched on this, but because pretty much all of our new clients at this point are mid-career professional families, so mostly clients that are 35 to 50, I would say, usually living in high cost of area locations, New York, San Francisco, LA, Miami, et cetera. They have a lot of the same questions, priorities, how they're thinking about money, what it's meant for. So I think that allows us to be really specific. And if you have the same type of conversations day in and day out, hopefully you get pretty good at understanding how to unpack it, how to present it, how to make sure your advice is meaningful and appropriate. We really hang our hat on that. As far as the firm itself and just kind of the broader numbers, we work with about 800 families, I would say, in total. We have 700 million of assets under management with an additional 200 million or so in annuities. That's with our friendly broker dealer, existing annuities. The way we structure the business is we have two different divisions. We have a retirement and income division that my dad, really runs. And that's, I would say, been the business, for the last 2, 3 decades or so, clients that are in or approaching retirement, kind of ready for that next stage of life. And then what I created when I came on board, over the last 6 to 8 years, is our wealth builder division. Wealth builders, who I just mentioned before, that kind of mid-career professionals. Of the total 700 million of assets under management, I would say about 170, 180 million of that is on the wealth builder side. And then we do about 3 to 500,000 of upfront financial planning fees each year. And that's all for new clients, obviously, before they become ongoing wealth management clients.
So how interesting that how much it morphed. And that seems to be that's a very common trajectory. A question for you. You just mentioned that over the last 6 to 8 years since you joined the firm, you really launched and built this wealth builder division. How hard was that to do? We have a lot of next gen advisors that are listeners. So, how hard is it to, even though it was a well established family business, what was it like just to build a new division?
Looking back, if I told myself from 5 years ago how many clients we'd have, how many advisors we have, the assets under management, I would have said, yeah, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. That seems pretty tough. So again, it comes back to I didn't have this plan or vision from day one. Truthfully, it was just every day doing the work, seeing more people, getting better at telling our story. And I'm the first to admit, I realize how privileged a position having a dad that's had this incredible business for decades and my grandpa before him, not only the business, but having a mentor like that, somebody, a rabbi that I went to him for everything. So I always had that in the back of my mind of I'm lucky most people don't have this, and I'm going to work as hard as humanly possible, become a student of the business to make sure I'm taking advantage. So nobody can say, even if I didn't articulate this back then, that nobody could say, oh, that's Lance's son. It was really important to me to put in the work, show everybody, again, which I don't know if that was the best attitude from day one, but having a chip on your shoulder is not the worst thing. But something I found early on is every advisor has a different style, a different way that works for them. And my dad is a loud personality. He's the best public speaker, quite frankly, I've ever heard. And I'm a little bit more introspective. I'm a little less of an extrovert for sure. And I think what I found over those first few years is stumbling onto my way of doing this. I love to write, like long essays. I wrote a book, and I'm sure I can cover that. But so to answer of how hard was it, I think the best thing I found early on was what worked for me. I started writing a weekly newsletter to my friends, to my clients, to different companies that we started working with. And I just really built my niche and my confidence that way through writing, through my own style of presenting. And the other best thing my dad did for me from the start, which applies to every young advisor, is he always said, don't just listen to me. don't just study for me. Like, I don't know everything. Go out and find people, and which ended up being Nick Murray, Michael Kitces, this podcast, a little bit later on, but go out and listen to every other advisor and find what works for you. So it was hard looking back, and there, definitely some things I did that, wow, I can't believe I did that for 6 months and didn't get a single client out of it. But I think I found my voice pretty early, and I found some of my passions, like for writing, combining that with financial planning, and that made it a little bit easier day to day, knowing where I was trying to get to.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's the very best advice that most any next gen advisor would tell you, that if all you tried to do is to step into or be your mentor, it's hard to succeed that way because no two people are exactly the same. The best thing a next gen advisor can do is to find their own voice, their own niche, have confidence in it, be authentic, and find their thing. For you, it was a newsletter, and that was your way of connecting people. And I think that's amazing. Let me pivot a little. Before launching Drucker Wealth as an independent RIA, your dad had been in the broker-dealer world, specifically with HTK. And I guess I'm less interested in HTK, what HTK was, because it could be any broker-dealer. But what was it about the broker-dealer world that made him say, and at what point did he say, I think we need to do something different?
Yeah, I think what made him say it was, hearing me in his ear for, a few months and having a lot of conversations about making the move. So I'll take it back, because making the transition and, leaving the broker dealer world was definitely just something I got really passionate about. And I'm thankful, and I'm happy to talk about how me and my dad went about that together. But again, backing up for a second, I do think giving a little context to even how we operated within the broker dealer world is super helpful, because we didn't just wake up one day, after 40 years and say, all right, everything that's been working, we've built a great business. Let's just do everything radically different, like out of nowhere. My dad really did operate Drucker Wealth, even within the broker dealer, always as our own independent firm. And by that, I mean, he never relied on the broker dealer for new ideas or coaching or technology support, or just, hey, here's how we do things. My dad was always pushing the envelope and looking for himself, our clients, and our team. Hey, what's going to make us better, more efficient, more profitable, deliver better value, et cetera. So, like, just a few examples. Even at the BD, everybody used one CRM that we didn't think was really quite good or effective. And my dad went out and we started using Redtail pretty early on, and made that change just internally while everybody else was using a different software. We started charging financial planning fees and, partnering with AdvicePay. I think we were the first one at the broker dealer and actually pushed them to get it approved. We partnered with a small account and robo advisor solution, brought it to the broker dealer, and spent a lot of months trying to get that across. So I guess I'm saying all this because even while we were at the broker dealer, we were always that team. And obviously at that point, it was mostly my dad saying, what's next? What could we do better? What could we do different? Rather than relying or waiting on our broker dealer HDK to push anything forward. And I think when you have that kind of mindset from the start, it makes the transition a lot easier, because it's just a continuation of the type of conversations we were already having. And I think, on the other side of that, as I was coming into the business, because I think these two stories got us to the end point together, over my first 5, 6 years, I really fell in love with financial planning and really like learning every aspect of the business. Going on kitces.com every week, listening to all of his podcasts, listening to other RIA owners just, talking about their own businesses, reading investment news, really like everything I could get my hands on. And, I have a type A personality. So when I kind of lock in and dive into something, I can become obsessive, which I think in this business is not the worst thing. So I really started broadening beyond just what's available within our little HTK broker dealer world, and realizing outside tech platforms that existed, and different ways of charging fees and different ways of thinking about all of this. And that really was happening around the same exact time that my particular part of the business was growing, pretty substantially. 75 new clients a year for the last 3, 4 years, reaching a more national audience. So all of these things were happening. And I know I'm veering off in a few different directions here, but all of this was happening over the same few year time period, which kind of just resulted in us realizing, wow, there's probably a better way of doing this, creating a better client experience, bringing technology and partnerships that we are choosing It's up to us to make work rather than just being the end of the equation that our broker dealer has to sign off on. So more than anything, that pivot point was all of this coming together and realizing we wanted the freedom and the control and quite frankly, the responsibility of choosing all of our partners and really being responsible and being able to choose our firm the way we see fit, every single inch of it, rather than being dependent on somebody else.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, but I loved what you said. You used the word better a lot in that narrative. And the way I heard it is such common ground with what we hear that the people that wind up leaving the broker dealer world are making any leap because changing firms or models is a hassle. And anybody who says otherwise would be lying. To be willing to disrupt momentum and go through the hassle of a change means the upside needs to be good enough. And it's the common ground is a desire to do better. You said better client service model. There got to be better mousetrap in terms of technology, whatever better is. So, number one, it's always striving to do better. I love that. And the second thing you said is the notion that it was you who really pushed your dad. You came in and had a fresh set of eyes and said, I think that there were things we could be doing differently. That is exceedingly common. We see that very often in multi-generational teams, whether it be familial multi-generational teams or just multi-generational teams in general, where the senior member of the team, it's all they've ever known. So it's good enough. It's more than good enough. And they could live with it, whatever it is for the rest of their career. But suddenly the next gen comes in with a longer runway and different perspectives and wants better and excited about technology. And suddenly what was good enough isn't so. So we see the next gen in a lot of cases, like with you, pushing or driving the senior members of the team. What I want to ask you though, was the move for you guys more about outgrowing HTK specifically, the broker dealer HTK, or the broker dealer model itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if we were at another BD that was more tech forward or financial planning focused, maybe it would have taken another few years to have the epiphany and point our skis down the mountain. But I really think it was more about the broker dealer model as a whole. The second part of why we made the move and the thing that was always day one, just a little annoying, kind of sat there of like, we have this going on is just when you have a broker dealer, and this is any broker dealer, they're kind of the silent piece, but the broker dealer had nothing to do with our Drucker Wealth firm story. They didn't interact with our clients. They really didn't have anything to do with our financial planning process and investment strategy. None of that is to speak ill of them. No matter what broker dealer we were at, we were independent firm. We had the way we wanted to do things, the way we wanted to provide for clients, but they're always still there. They're visible. And it just got to the point where it started feeling like one more thing we had to explain clients because clients are getting HDK clunky paperwork. They're getting their statements that say HDK and Gideon Drucker. When they're logging in to their portal, HDK and Drucker Wealth, and it just muddled things up. And I think as we started thinking about the next 5, 10 years, and we do a lot of outward facing marketing. I do webinars twice a month. I wrote a book. We have newsletters. We reach a lot of clients in tech that are online, and that's how they're finding us. And having Drucker Wealth and HDK, these two different firms, and they know everything about Drucker Wealth, and everything is transparent and available, and they can see everything about us. But then there's this HDK that has hundreds of other advisors that have nothing to do with Drucker Wealth. Like it's understandably a little bit confusing to clients, to prospective clients. And I think that just ate at me a little bit and was just a frustrating thing of why does this exist? Everything is coming from Drucker Wealth anyway, but they're there and making it a little bit more difficult to do business. Like we're doing the hard part, which is reaching people that want our help and providing the financial planning. But everything surrounding those two fundamental responsibilities of us was being muddled by this outside partner that wasn't really part of our story. So that's where I like to think, no matter who the broker dealer was, I think it was more about the model that we wanted to change and really make it easier for our story to be you are partnering with Drucker Wealth, we're your advisor team, and that's it. That's the whole relationship that we're dealing with. So to that standpoint, I think it was more about the model than any specific frustration point.
Well, it sounds like while there may have been some things about HTK that might have frustrated you, even if another broker dealer would have been able to solve or some of the things at some point, you might have outgrown the model as well. But let me ask you two things. One, How long before you actually made the move did you get the realization that it was time to go? And said another way, like, how long was the due diligence process? And did your dad immediately see what you saw when you said, "Dad, I think we need to consider other options"? Did he say, "Yes, sign me up"?
I would say in April of 23 is really when, I remember it was a Saturday morning. I had just gone on a run, I wish I remembered exactly which podcast it was, but listened to a financial planning podcast, and then wrote my dad this long email of basically saying, "Hey, you've built an incredible business. I'm happy to be helping continue build it, but you've built 90% of an independent business that our clients love us. They stay with us for generations. I think the next part of our story is going out independent, doing this ourselves, owning every aspect of this. I'm ready to do that." So that was kind of the epiphany moment of when I realized 100% we wanted to make this move. I would say for the few years before that, we had frustrations with HDK a lot of times about technology that we wanted to use. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, that it was always asking permission or them not entirely seeing it the way we saw or other firms did. So there were always frustrations, but I would say until April of 23, the frustrations were always more about, all right, how do we in from inside the tent get HDK to get where we're coming from, to make it was always about improving things from within rather than, I don't think before that we really had a serious conversation about actually leaving and doing our own thing. And yeah, when I laid it all out for my dad from the start, he basically said, "I'm in, you're right, I get it. I'm ready to do this thing." We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know we wanted to launch our own RIA. We just knew we wanted to start looking at other options outside of HDK. And again, I have to give even more credit to my dad. The way he ran the business his whole life, change is good. Getting comfortable, being uncomfortable is good. Being adaptable as a leader, he's always said good leaders know when to get out of the spotlight and set the next generation up for success. His whole worldview was such that when I came to him confidently and said, "Hey, I really think we got to do this thing and I'm committed to putting in the work and spearheading it," he said, "Cool, I'm in." And I realized how unique that is, and talking to other advisors
Yeah.
and hearing other parent or generational relationships where it doesn't go that way. I am eternally thankful that that was the reaction from day one. And I kept going in that direction, obviously.
You're right about that, Gideon, because a lot of times senior advisors, even when they're all about wanting to make life good for their next generation, their child, still protecting their own. When you get to be a certain age, and I am definitely closer to your dad's age than yours, you get to a point where you just don't want to upset the apple cart. It's more than good enough. And so the fact that he was that open-minded and willing to do that, even though he probably could have spent the rest of his career just fine with the status quo, is pretty exceptional. So let me ask you a question. Can you give us one or two quick, tangible examples of things you wanted to do in the broker-dealer world, either that you couldn't do or began to feel like you could do better? And you mentioned technology as one of them, so maybe that'll be one of your examples.
Yeah, I think most of the examples are on the tech side, but tech not by itself. It just makes you more efficient, but really technology that allows us to provide better service, more service to clients. So one of them, Pantera, for managing held away 401ks. That was always a common client question of, "Hey, you're also going to manage my 401ks and you'll pick the funds and trade and do all that for me, right?" And that, well, no, because it's on a different platform and it's a different custodian. And you go give this whole song and dance, and clients are just saying, "I just kind of want you to manage it. Like, that's why I'm hiring you." So the fact that we weren't able to do that, and that was really important to us. We knew how important it was to clients just because we heard that over and over again. So being able to use Pantera, which we've been using, from the start of the transition, has been a really, really powerful thing for us, for our growth. And, the clients love it. Wealth.com on the estate planning side of things, I fell in love with them pretty early on, to be able to provide a partner for clients, again, because of who our clients are, mid-career, professional, young families, most of whom either haven't gotten their estate planning documents done, or they got it, they got it 5 years ago, and now they have 3 kids that didn't exist back then. So being able to work with a estate planning platform that could actually efficiently, smoothly get those documents done, that was huge. We've been working with them all year, and that's been a huge value add to our clients. I'm not a promoter, or anything like that, but just we've had a fantastic experience with them. And I'll give two more. And this is a little bit of the nerdy part in me, but The paperwork, I built out our Drucker Wealth client agreement on our paperwork, and it sounds like a little bit of a ridiculous thing to spend time on, but I was really proud of it. I always felt the broker dealer paperwork, and I'm sure this is every broker dealer out there. There's like 3 relevant pages and 80 pages that don't apply to your business model or maybe make sense for the other 500 advisors, but it didn't speak to us. And I care about every aspect of the client experience. They agree to move forward with you. It's a huge sign of trust. And then they get this mound of paperwork that's confusing and, not transparent. And then we built ours where it says exactly what we just went over in the meeting. The fees are outlined, what they're going to get, our expectations for them, their expectations for us. We created paperwork that if I were sitting in their shoes, I'd say, yeah, cool. This is exactly what we just covered.
Whoa,
I'm excited to get started. So
whoa.
that's a little thing, but that was important to us. And not that, quite frankly, clients really ever didn't move forward with it. But we don't want them to just move forward. We want them to be excited, motivated, and ready to go.
Yeah, and that's not a little thing. I actually think that's a massive thing because having the right onboarding paperwork demonstrates A, a level of sophistication, and B, a level of alignment. And that's what a new client wants. They want to know that you get them, that you're with them. So I think that's a great example. Let me pivot a little. We talked for a second about you being a next gen advisor, but let's talk about being a next gen leader. So, at what point did your dad feel comfortable passing the reins to you? And how did you feel about accepting those reins?
I guess officially, I took over summer of 2023. And I say officially, I'm smiling behind the scenes here. The way my dad has run our business forever is really not so much a hierarchical thing. Like I was involved in decision making from day one when we would have vendors come in or technology partners or the leaders of HDK. He involved me in those decisions, in those meetings from day one. So from that standpoint, it didn't feel like this radical change. And then also to give at least a little credit to myself, I think for the last 3-4 years, as I started becoming more interested in all of this, I really committed myself to running our internal operations and making changes to our process and bringing in different consultants to enhance our CRM, the way we used it, for example, or the way we charge fees and building out new fee models. So I think it was more gradual and just it happened rather than some big announcement. And what was always really important to me is I always wanted to outwork everyone on the team because I never wanted to be the stereotypical owner's son who comes in, has it all on a silver platter and takes it from there. And I like to think the team would back me up on that. By the time I kind of officially took over the firm, I had already really been doing all of that work from day one. And part of it, my dad's built this great business. He's done a great job personally, has made himself financially independent. I also, as his son, really I wanted him to get to do the parts of the business that he enjoyed and wants to keep doing, which is bringing in new business and meeting with his clients and not having to deal with anything else. So early on, I wanted to take over more of the operations and the compliance responsibility and the marketing and the biz dev, really. So he's earned the right to do exactly what he wants to do in the business and no more. So it worked for what everybody was looking for out of it. And it's just, again, been more of a gradual thing, even if there was a specific moment in time where I guess, my title technically changed.
Yeah. And how did his clients react to that? Like, I get you were building a new business, so those new clients are very comfortable with you being a leader of the firm. But your dad had 500 million or so in clients of his own. How did those clients feel about him passing the reins?
Yeah, I think they felt great about it. I think clients want to make sure that you're not a one-man band anyway. We have great other advisors and a lot of his team works with Kathleen on our team as well. But my dad wasn't, he was still working with his clients. So those clients to this point still are working with the advisors, him and Kathleen, that they always were. So even if the team structure was changing, it didn't really affect them day to day. But I also think they were thrilled to know that, hey, even when Lance does slow down a little bit or maybe doesn't want to spend as much time on client meetings, that we have a full team that is going to take care of them. So I think they got the best of both worlds. They still had Lance and they knew that there was a plan behind that. And again, we've been doing a good job. My dad's been sending his clients my newsletters when I win an award, when I'm on a podcast, anything I do, he's always sending to his clients. So I think I've built my credibility through the way my dad talks about me and kind of what we've achieved on our side. to really make them more excited about the change than anything else.
Yeah, I love it. We've had a similar dynamic in my business, and that's exactly right. I get to do what I love, and my children really run the day to day operations, which makes it a win for everybody. I want to pivot right now to the transition itself. So, leaving HTK, the broker dealer world, and moving to the RIAs. So, first of all, I want to say that my firm, we are honored by the privilege of having represented you and your dad in doing the due diligence and ultimately making this transition. So, first and foremost, what was it that made you reach out to us and what value did it add? In other words, you knew you wanted to move. What was the process like and what kind of stuff did we do for you that you couldn't necessarily have done on your own relative to the due diligence process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You guys were in it from day one. Wendy was fantastic, and there wasn't a process without you guys. My friend Matt Blocky who's been on your podcast, been on a bunch. I actually I think I had listened to him for the first time on Kitsis, and so much of what he was sharing was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I want to do, how I want to do it. He's built an incredible business and the way I want. So I just honestly reached out to him out of the blue. This was like 6 months before that. Couldn't have been a nicer guy, was super helpful. We had calls. He was just, from day one, he was an unbelievable resource and then became a friend. And he introduced me to you guys. And quite frankly, anybody that he introduced, I really didn't need to do any other diligence or checking to know that you guys were a team we wanted to work with. And I think the biggest value that you guys provided, there are so many, not that I need to tell you, but so many options out there. And it's like drinking out of a water hose. Like, where do you go? Who do you speak to? You could spend 5 years doing nothing but talking to different RIAs, broker dealers, and find yourself in a better spot. And I'll say that's important because at the start, we were not planning to become our own RIA. Even if that's ultimately where I thought we would be best served and where we would end up, I realized how heavy of a lift that would be coming from a broker dealer. We're on the furthest side of independence, and then doing our own thing with a custodian and nothing else seemed like I didn't want to put my dad through that, quite frankly. He's supportive of this transition. He's been at HDK for 40 years. I thought it'd be a little bit much to kind of go all the way on our own. And I just thought that would be kind of too much to do all at once. So we initially had felt we wanted to join another RIA, maybe another broker dealer. And that's where we started looking. And I'll talk about what that experience was like. But I think what your team and Wendy did was kind of narrow the focus after understanding what was important to us, why we wanted to move, what we were looking for. So we spoke with a lot of great firms, but it helped us to narrow in on and kind of bring together a realistic path that wouldn't take 10 years for us to have every conversation under the sun.
So tell me about that. Let us hear a little bit about how you made that decision. What other kind of models did you look at? The notion of passing up an aggressive transition deal from either another independent broker dealer or even a Merrill Lynch. How did you get to the RIA space? And tell us about the model. So you said you didn't want to put your dad through the hassle of going cold turkey to the furthest end of the spectrum. What did it wind up looking like?
Yeah, and I'll say because at the time we didn't know anything, like the idea of just, you just set up your firm with a custodian. And I remember asking like, so the custodian is the broker deal? Like, like when a fish in water doesn't know it's out. So inside of the broker dealer, it was the idea of that was kind of mind blowing. And that was a huge part of what Diamond did for us is just helping us understand. I love that visual. You guys have like the different types of independence from most flexibility on the one side to I forget what the other arrow is, but I had that in my mind for months. So we looked at other broker dealers and we looked at RIAs. I think, we've always, and my dad, we loved Commonwealth from, and just a name drop there, I guess, but we loved Commonwealth from the start. So I think if I didn't push this, I don't think my dad probably would have ever left. But if he did, it would have been to a firm like Commonwealth. He just always thought they ran a great shop and we've spoken with them. And we looked at a number of larger RIAs to plug into. And we had a lot of those conversations. They all went really well. Like we liked a lot about the different firms we were speaking with. But I think as we were having those calls, there was always one thing missing, right? It's like the Goldilocks, too hot, too cold. Like there was always one thing missing, whether it was a custodian I really wanted to partner with, like Altruist, which I can share about, or a fee model or a platform, or just there was always one thing that didn't work. And then, we kept having these conversations looking for the perfect solution. And then I think, me and my dad just had one, we were like sitting together after one of these calls and just kind of realized like we're clearly looking for something specific and intentional. And the amount of RIAs and broker dealers that told us, wow, you guys asked more questions than we've ever been asked in the history of firms reaching out. Like I would have come with like a list of 100 questions. We're type A New Yorkers, we can be intense. And I think as we kept having these conversations and our questions were deep, we realized maybe we do just want to do this ourselves. Like we keep lasering in on these super detailed things that I guess most people don't care enough about or aren't focused on. And you have that same kind of conversation all over and over again and realize, well, like I actually want to nerd out on the details. I actually want to figure out how to put together the paperwork or our fee billing or how the technology overlays. And I think, but we would have got, that's the important part. We never would have got to that epiphany successfully if we didn't have all those other meetings with these different firms. And if we had just said at the start, we're going to launch our RIA, I think our heads would have exploded because it just would have been too much at the start. But 3 months later, we had gotten there after exploring all of our options with the team.
Honestly, that's how it goes. We talk about the due diligence process being strategic and iterative. In that, if we do our job in helping you to get really crystal clear on what your goals are, then we start out with, say, exploring 3 options, one from each category. In some cases, it's a wirehouse, a regional firm, and an independent broker dealer. And we add other options as we go along based upon that feedback. So in your particular case, it started with looking at other broker dealers and the realization for you that that wouldn't have moved the needle enough. It
Exactly.
wouldn't have given you the autonomy enough and the control enough to do what you want to do. And that happens often. So you mentioned Altruist as custodian. You guys opted to launch with 2 custodians, which is actually unusual in and of itself. Usually people launch with one. But talk to us about Altruist. And I think your other custodian is Fidelity. Talk to us about why Altruist, which is not the most popular custodian, and why 2 custodians.
Yeah, so I started reading about altruists, I want to say even a year before we contemplated the move. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is the future. This is, when I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall on certain things, operationally, opening accounts wise with HDK, like somebody read my mind and understood like this is the direction the industry, the business is going. And that happened to be Jason Wang and his team. So from the start, especially for the next generation, what attracted me from day one is the vision, digital account openings, digital Roth conversions, building a tax overlay for the way you can manage your accounts there. And the custodian is perfectly built for financial planning focused advisors that want to make the account opening process easy, transparent, quick, all those adjectives. So I really fell in love with what they were building pretty early on because I was sitting in this broker dealer environment with NetX 36 as the client portal, which every week I got a client reaching out being like, hey, like it's kind of tough. Like, I don't really understand the client portal. I have a few clients say, you're lucky I love you guys so much because looking at this client portal is like making my head spin. And realizing what Altruist was offering was just the antithesis of that. So again, I fell in love with them kind of early on and even before the transition. And they were really like, even as I was reaching out to these other firms, I was asking them, hey, so can we use Altruist if we're joining your RIA or BD? So as for why we use 2 custodians, most of my dad's this, it's pretty straightforward. Most of my dad's clients are in their 60s, 70s. They've been with us for a long time. Altruist is a newer firm, digital account opening, which I think is wonderful for my 45-year-old clients. I don't know that that's as much of a incentive for my 65-year-old, for my dad's 65-year-old clients. So quite frankly, Fidelity just felt like the right fit because they're a trusted name brand. Everybody knows Fidelity. Most of our clients probably even had a Fidelity 401k anyway. So when we were making this big transition, we wanted the transition to be, we didn't want it to be hard, but we knew it would be. So for those clients, Fidelity was just kind of a at the easier name, I think, to get comfortable with, understand what we were doing. And my clients, I really did think from day one would appreciate and enjoy the more kind of digital, forward-facing nature of what Altruist could provide.
Got it. So you opted for the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the transition itself. Like, how difficult was it? What were the challenges of changing the underpinning of the business, learning new technology, et cetera? How did you acclimate? How did your dad acclimate? And how did your staff and clients acclimate?
We launched in February of last year, so February 2024, and it was a lot of hard work. Yeah, there's no way around it. Anybody, I think you said this earlier, but if anybody says, "Oh yeah, transition, it's not that hard. It'll be fine," like it's not true. It's 1000% worth it and the best thing we've ever done. But it was a lot of work. We planned for it for months in advance and crossed our T's, dotted our I's. We made sure the team understood. We talked to our whole team from day one, like it wasn't some big secret, me and my dad. And then we unveiled it a month before. It was something we had talked about all throughout the experience. And I think that was really helpful, so everybody was on the same page. And what was easy, what was hard? The easy part, and I've heard other advisors say this, and I would say this to everybody listening, your clients are working with you. Our clients loved us, trusted us. And again, this is easier when you're at a small BD like HDK, where of course everybody is working with Drucker Wealth and Lance and Gideon and Kitty and Autumn and Sarah. They're not working with the BD, but explaining it to clients was the easiest part of the entire process, quite frankly. Like they heard the passion, the excitement in our voice, the reinvigorated for the business, for the clients, what we were going to be able to do for them. So if anything, they just were excited with us, for us, or they just said, "Yeah, I trust you. I don't really care who the custodian is, who the BD is. You guys say this is what we're doing. Cool. Just let us know what I need to do." So that was the easier part. People get nervous or anxious about explaining to clients, having those conversations. We explained it to all of our clients once we moved, but that went great. The hard part is that first 2 to 3 weeks, be prepared to be uncomfortable and chaotic, right? When like every client is getting their updated client agreement, the DocuSign, and it feels like the world is spinning out of control. Again, we had 800 families. That's a lot of people to move. And that was, I think, a frustrating time for my dad, especially those first 2 weeks. You build a business for 40 years, and in a blink of an eye, there's literally not a business, right? Until the money comes over, there's not a business anymore. So we were prepared. We explained it to clients. We were front of everything. But yeah, it's a solid month of just playing the long game and knowing that it's all going to come to where it needs to be.
Yeah. So I appreciate the honesty around it's terrifying. And how you just painted it is exactly right. For 40 years, your dad had a stable and ever growing business. And in a blink of an eye, he's got zero assets under management. And that is terrifying. And you're right about that. So let's talk about the why you did it. Look, you wouldn't have disrupted momentum. You wouldn't have put your dad through the hassle, and you wouldn't have gone through that challenging time if there wasn't a lot of upside. What is the upside you're hoping for? I want to understand a little bit about how you see the future of Drucker Wealth in terms of your goals, in terms of succession, in terms of monetizing its enterprise value. What comes next?
We didn't go from one BD to another with a shinier mousetrap. It's really, we wanted the ability to control our own future, right? So it's almost like getting that silent partner, out of the way so you can really do what's the best interests of your clients, your team. So what I'm so excited about with Drucker Wealth is we want to be a one-stop shop. We want our clients, and I think they already do, but even to a greater extent, any financial decision they have to make, anything they're thinking about, we want to be the first call. Whether it's about their investments, which is obvious, or their cash flow, student loans, or insurance, but also if it's about their estate planning or their tax filing and tax prep, we're building in-house that we want to be able to do all of these different areas, which I quite frankly just think is where the industry is going, to be able to charge the fees that we do. You got to broaden the services you're offering. And clients really want it all under one roof. They don't want to be coordinating with 7 different, an insurance professional and an estate planner and a tax. They want one person doing it, which is what we've been doing for years. But I think the way we see the future and being an independent RIA allows us to do this is not just to coordinate all those different people and departments, but having it all under Drucker Wealth, us actually being responsible for making sure all of those things get done. And it's technology to allow us to provide deeper, more integrated services. And that's where I see us going. And being an RIA just allows us to do all of that faster.
Yeah. And what do you think the end game is for you? That's probably a ridiculous question because you're young with a very long runway. And the last thing you're thinking is the end of the day. But do you see yourself selling the business someday? Do you see yourself becoming an acquirer of other practices? What does it look like as you go forward?
The first question, I have literally never thought about selling the business or leaving or anything like that. I love what I do. I want to build this thing 20, 30 years down the road. I don't have kids yet, but I'd love my nephews and nieces to join. So yeah, I see this for the long term. And our focus, we've built a really good online presence, marketing arm, whatever you want to call it. I really enjoy doing that. I love writing and hosting webinars and kind of being out there. And the way I see us growing is more organically. We have a lot of people in our niche. We've built that out for who we want to work with, I think, really well. And people are reaching out. So I see us growing organically. We want to keep bringing on new advisors one by one. At this point, we've had success over the last few years doing that, of the firm being responsible for generating new business, bringing them in and kind of handing them off to advisors whose their sole responsibility is doing a great job for clients, right? Guiding them through the process, providing financial advice, being there when they need them, rather than going out and having to prospect, cold call, do any of that. So that's the way I see us growing over the next 5, 10 years, is continuing to bring on advisors that want to grow, want to build a career, and want to really do financial planning and maybe didn't love the prospecting side of it. We want to get to $1 billion under management. We want to grow an internal tax department and then take it from there. A year after the transition, I haven't thought about, acquiring or anything like that. We're trying to grow this organically for now and seeing how far we can take that.
Fair enough. And I love it. That's a great answer. As we wrap up, one final question. If I were sitting with your dad, what advice might he give other next gen listeners or even other dads in a similar position to him?
Yeah, that's a great question. He'd say that being a good leader is knowing when to step aside, and obviously the trust has to be there, that the younger person knows what they're doing. That you just trust them, but also that they're competent and going to do a great job. But he said that starts from day one. Like, you got to give the younger person room to breathe, room to grow, to kind of build themselves into it. And more than anything, change is good. He got to where he is because he was constantly reinventing the business, changing what he was doing. So our now joint story is a continuation of that. I think he'd say, because we've talked about it, getting to work together, me and him day to day, is the coolest part of, and I know you can relate, is the coolest part. I get to work, even though we haven't been on client meetings in like 6 years together, but getting to be with partners and new hires and all that, that's the best part of this. Is my dad, my best friend, is also my business partner. I can't think of anything cooler. I'd say if you were really talking to him, he does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 5 days a week. And he'd probably tell you or anybody else to just do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because it's good for the soul. And I'm kind of kidding, but he would be saying that not kidding. But yeah, doing hard things, getting out of your comfort zone, all of that would be kind of where he takes the conversation.
I love it. Your dad sounds like an interesting guy. It sounds like you have a beautiful and wonderful relationship, and nobody gets better than me the joy of having your business partners be the people you love and respect the most in the world. So Gideon, thank you. It was a real pleasure and refreshing to hear not only your perspective, but the smart perspective of a next gen advisor. Sounds like you've got the world by its tail, and we're excited to see great things for you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And again, thanks for all the help over the last few years.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.